This is going to be a bunch of thoughts I've had for a while, but are only exploding out of my head now because Knuckle Duckle embodies everything I've wanted to complain about with regards to Genshin's power creep, both in characters and in in-game. And I'm going to preface this by saying if you're someone who will comment, I just get the primos and dip, then you are not the target audience for this video because that mindset leaves you incapable of engaging with the problems I'm going to talk about. I want that reroll feather more than I want the primogems, honestly. Funny enough, this Onslaught lineup has the two bosses I think embody everything wrong with the Genshin's in-game design. The Secret Source Automaton and the Knuckle Duckle I mentioned before. Secret Source was in the first ever rotation as well, and back then was the reason I immediately knew from the beginning that Stygian Onslaught can be almost good, but can never actually be a good game mode. Bosses designed to be fought with a specific element are nothing new. You can look to the infamous Golden Wolf Lord for an example of a boss that for all intents and purposes requires Geo to beat. There are a couple differences though, the big one being that Wolf Lord is incredibly squishy with about half as much HP as the Secret Source does in the overworld. Of course, Wolf Lord has never been an Onslaught, so it's hard to say how that comparison would scale. The other is that any Geo character can do because you don't need persistent Geo application. It doesn't make a difference if whether you're running a Geo main DPS or just wheelchair Ningguang through the rest of the Abyss to give her 10 seconds of field time against the dog. Secret Source on the surface is designed to be fought with cryo characters, but the reality is that it's a hard check for Skirk or Escoffier. I've seen Aika Hyperbloom and very well invested C1 Ganyu clears, but for the most part any team without Skirk or Escoffier is going to basically be a brute force attempt. And then if you do bring enough cryo to bring down its resistances, the stupid thing just sits there for a full minute and becomes a boring punching bag rather than a boss. Secret Source convinced me that Onslaught can never be good because it made it apparent from the beginning that regardless of how long you've been playing or how wide your roster is, if you don't have the exact right one or two characters, Mihoyo can just choose to fuck you over at a moment's notice. Which brings me to the goddamn Knuckle Duckle. This god-awful boss is everything wrong with Onslaught and Mihoyo's hard pivot into shell mechanics. Kill its ducks with either Electrocharge or Lunar Charge or with raw damage to break its shield, and then you can start working your way through almost as much health as the other two current Onslaught bosses combined. This boss is a harder check for Inefa or Flynn's than Secret Source is for Skirk or Escoffier. There are 0 other Electrocharge center teams that have anywhere near enough DPS, so if you don't have either of those two characters, you must brute force, and unfortunately I'm in that camp. That's really the big problematic shift in Genshin's in-game design. It has become too heavily tailored to the characters released in the last year and a half of this game's almost 6-year lifespan, and therefore to the accelerating power creep that those characters have brought with them. It's even spread to Abyss with blatant Lunar Shield on both sides of this rotation and the highest HP total of all time. So if you don't have specifically not-quite 5-star characters, you are in a lot of trouble because for some reason, the 4 stars can't enable lunar reactions. Abyss has always had some level of shill, but it was balanced to match the game's much more even power levels. Even up through Fontaine, there wasn't really any power creep. Neuvillette broke the game in a sense, but can you really consider him power creep? The only other Hydro DPSs at the time were fucking Ayato and Child, so the bar was underground. And then he got power crept by Mulan if you're willing to put up with her clunk to achieve better damage. Arlecchino finally ended Hu Tao's several-year run as the best pyro carry, but the gap was close enough that balancing around Arlecchino still led Hu Tao clear. Meanwhile, the game now being balanced around Mavica tier characters has left Arlecchino on the brink of unviability, while my poor Hu Tao has started talking to the mirror to sell herself a coffin. My go-tos for brute forcing are Nefer and Verisa, but they simply do not cut it this time. I don't have the Yansan or Chevrius cons to bring Verisa up to par, and I'm gearless, so Nefer isn't a complete character, even at C1, which is, oh look at that part 2 of this rant, wow look at that transition. I honestly don't mind a limited DPS having another limited character designed to be their best teammate. That's arguably a new change, starting with I think Farina and Neuvillette, and I really don't care. It doesn't bother me one bit to play Skirk without Escoffier, because even if it's suboptimal, it's far from bad. Same for Flynn's without a Nefa. People call him a fraud, but just him and Aino or Columbina is enough to clear in-game if your Fischl is good enough. But what the hell did Mihoyo do to Nefer? Nefer without Llama isn't suboptimal, it's unplayable. Llama is the difference between Nefer being a Sumeru tier character and the current peak of the game's power balance. How does that not make Nefer the biggest fraud in the entire game? I scrapped a video where I went through hell beating Sigurd and Onslaught with my dearest Nefer and rewarded her with C1 when I succeeded, hoping it would make up for not having Llama at least a little. And it doesn't. It's not anywhere close. Currently, Nefer, Llama, and Columbina together can brute force Knuckle Duckle's 13 million HP check, but C1 Nefer without Llama doesn't get anywhere close. At this point, all I can do is hope someone finds some absurd tech that cheeses the fight somehow. So yeah, this video is basically a glorified crash out because I think I've just lost faith in Mihoyo's ability to design both in-game and characters. They've clearly and unfortunately given in to the dark side of gacha gaming and sacrificed everything that made in-game fun for me. I used to like when Abyss was hard because it usually meant I had to try a team composition that I had never done before, or it pushed me to play better with a familiar team. But now if Abyss is hard, it's because I don't have the characters with the exact mechanic they're trying to sell. Previous elemental checks used to be more general, and oftentimes more suggestions than requirements. Now not only are they as much of a suggestion as the IRS telling you to pay taxes, but now you have to meet that elemental condition with a team that's at the peak of the game's achievable DPS. If you don't have the most recent limited characters, you'll be miserably brute forcing endgame, because power creep will keep going, and we are now solidly in the era of lunar wheelchair. Binefa and Llama carry damn near every character to 100k DPS, and soon Benea will join in to save Geo by doing enough damage to make up for Ito being dog shit. Rejoice, for you can play an idiot-proof team while AFK with your favorite character on field and pretend they're still good enough to clear, but I want to use the characters I like in a team where they actually do something instead of looking pretty while Inefa and Columbina do all the work. But then again, I think Theater is the best in-game, so what do I know?